Yo, what's good, everyone? Glad everybody enjoyed episode 1 and 2, and here we are with episode 3. I am joined here today by Franz. Hello, Franz.
Hi, everybody.
Do you want to
I
just
am
introduce yourself?
Franz.
Right,
Yeah,
yes.
sure. I'll just go ahead. I'm Franz. I'm a top level runner in Ratchet 1, and I guess I'm also quite decent at some other rat games like Ouya, and maybe Size Matters at one point, but that's pretty much it.
You still have size matters records, don't you? Some of them.
No, I think I've only held record in not no ship proxy, but then I got it a couple of years ago, I think.
Right, fair enough. Well, I mean, hell, he's still very good at the game, and I feel like saying that you're just good at Ratchet 1 is a bit of an understatement, but that's
Yeah,
okay.
it's kind of cocky to say I'm the best runner in Ratchet 1 when I don't even hold every board record. But
Some of that, I mean, that actually is sort of leading into my first topic, funny enough. But um,
oh,
it's sort of the situation where you don't have the records, and yet I still think that most of the community would agree that you're probably the best Ratchet. Well, probably, I mean, definitely the best Ratchet One runner. I mean, it's been shown time and time again, right? It's just incredible. You come back out of nowhere, and within 2 days, you drop, a world record, and it's quite. I don't even know what the word is. It's just like weird to me how consistent you can be. And
oh yeah,
so
it's almost tradition how I've come back now and get world record back in 3 or 4 days.
yeah, I
I,
mean, it's
I
literally a
called it the
pattern.
the 3 day rule now.
The 4940 AGB, a ridiculous run that happened what, like day
Oh yeah.
one.
Oh no,
uh,
actually that was different because I don't know if you remember, but at the time I think Tab was playing. So, and there were the AGB Fridays every week, so everybody was
yeah.
excited for that and hyped. And there was one AGB Friday where there was a $200 prize pool, and I had been practicing quite a bit for that. After I got world record in that AGB Friday, a couple of days later, I actually got the 4940. So I actually had been
That's right.
practicing for a couple of weeks for that one.
Because that was the day you got two records in 1 day. Yeah, that was the any percent record as well.
Oh, was it both at the same day?
I think it was that one. Hold on, I
I
can
haven't.
check. I've got them right here. Oh, it's not giving me the exact date. Oh yeah, April 12th, 2021, and
Might have been
April
the
12th.
day
Yeah, it was
after.
the same day. At least they made it to
Oh,
your
wow.
YouTube channel the same day. Because I remember everyone blew up because just out of nowhere, everyone was like, "Oh, crazy record!" And then later in the day, you also just crap out. You skip a minute barrier and crap out the sub 50 AGB, and everyone's just like, "What the hell?" Because at the time, you'd only been playing the game for like a week or two again. Like realistically, not that
Yeah,
long
exactly.
to get two major records, like in two categories. Um, which is crazy, right? That's one thing I actually wanted to ask you, right? Like, how do you feel about your, I'd call it consistency, right? Because I can tell you, until maybe recent years, I always struggled to come back, right? I would not even consider myself really doing real record attempts for the first like 2, 3 weeks of being back to the game, right? But you're doing like real
hmm
attempts day one and getting records. Like, how do you approach that? How does that feel?
I think it's because I played the game like when I started playing the game I played so much. So I got the inconsistency out of the way in the first year of speedrunning.
Yeah.
And after that it just becomes so consistent at the game that you don't need that much time to de-rust, especially in Rock 1 because it's an easy game to de-rust.
Mm.
So you can just come back, get a feel for the movement again. You're pretty much ready to go. Like you don't need to practice a trick so much to get consistent at it again, unless it's something like beam jump in recent days or the new building two Strat in NGT
Yeah.
Plus, because those are strats that I haven't gotten consistent at when I started playing because they're recent.
Well,
But
they're so
for pretty
recent that
much
you
everything
haven't
else,
had. what you talked about, which is just the year of, repetition with it, right? Because you said you spent,
Exactly.
like a year straight just playing so much. And is that what you would um credit most of your consistency to? Just really hyper practicing the movement for like a year straight?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I would say that 80% of my speed running of my playing rack one was in the first year. So, 2018, until I
Yeah.
got my first world record, and then I just stopped playing for a while, for a couple of months because I was satisfied. But
Mm.
yeah, that's where most of my skill comes from.
From there, would you say it's mostly just been sort of updating records, or has it been a sort of realization that, hey, even though I'm pretty good, I could get a bit better? Or is it a mix of both?
Um, like what pushed me at the start when I started playing was beating everybody else in the leaderboard. So after I got first place, I didn't did not have that drive anymore. So it was kind of an obligation or yeah, an obligation to the game to get a better time to maybe reach the next minute barrier. That's why I
Mm.
got 18. But I never felt like I was doing it because I wanted to improve myself.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've
You
been I've
know.
been asking everybody about this. I feel like for some reason, and it seems to be at a different time for everybody, but everybody who gets to that highest level, at some point the mindset seems to shift from I want to be better than the next person to I want to push the game because the game deserves it. Like it's a shift to an obligation to the category rather than like, a competitive will to beat anyone. Which is why I always say that I used to prefer competing alongside someone because I wanted to beat them. Whereas these days I don't give a
Hmm.
crap. I'm perfectly happy playing on my own because all I care about is the game being pushed as far as it can be. Right? So would you when would you say that sort of shift happened for you?
Um, Definitely after I got a low 19, I felt like there was no one else who could get an 18. So I had to, actually grind the game again like I did back in the first year and push to the next minute barrier because nobody else could do it. And I had, how I said, as I've said, I felt this obligation to the game
Hmm.
because nobody else was playing it at that level. Ricky wasn't playing at top level. He was playing something else, so I had to do it.
And even when he came back, he managed to catch up after a lot of hard work. And then you obviously did that famous 1830 where you just crushed it again, right? And a lot of people interpret that as you still just being a whole level above. Like, not to downplay Ricky, obviously, he got the time he was happy with and
Hmm.
stopped playing. So we'll never know how it would have played out if he kept playing, right? But at the same time, like I think that is some of why people consider you so good at the game because you just sort of come back and you get these ridiculous times that nobody else seems to match, and then you just keep going. Like there are so many records I remember talking to people about, and I'd just be like, surely this is the last one France gets for a while. And then the next week you drop like another 10, 15 seconds off it, and we're all just like bewildered by the fact that it's even possible to go that low. Like I was looking at the sobs. There was only like 25 seconds to play with, and somehow in my head I was like, surely this guy can still get the 17 because we believe in the consistency so much, right? And I think some of that
Hmm.
comes from just you constantly proving that you can improve. Because I think you'd probably agree. Every time you grind, even if it's a sense of obligation, you go into it because you believe that you can get X time, but you still have to improve to get there, right? Like I'm sure you'd agree from your say
Oh,
19,
absolutely.
18 grind to your 18. I think it was 55 originally, right? Um, you had to improve a
I'm not
lot
sure.
to get there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Would you say that it was like more of a grind, like more improvement to get from that 1918 to the 1855 than it was to get from say 20 to world record?
No, I think the grind to the first world record was by far the hardest and the most uh you know uh tough from a mental perspective. The
Mm.
other world records were just you gotta play the game and work on that trick and that trick, polish the movement, and then just do attempts until you get down there. Because again, Rec 1 is one of those games where you have to do thousands of attempts every time
Yeah.
if you wanna lower your time. But yeah, no, it was not any of the world records that I've gotten after the first one, after the 1928 was I was not as proud, and I never worked as hard as I did for the first one, for
So you'd
the
still say you're
for the
most proud
ones
of the
after that.
1928.
Oh yeah, for sure.
See,
Like
that's interesting to
I
me.
don't think I would even go as far as to say that the 1928 was one of my highest highs in life, not only my speedrunning career.
Right, because it was such a hard thing to do, right? I mean, I feel like
Yeah,
that's pretty common for a lot of speedrunners because everybody has that one run that they regard higher than the rest of their runs, right? Most
yeah,
speedrunners,
what
you can
that
ask them
round
and
that
they'll
you'll
give
never
it to
forget
you.
about.
Yeah, right. See, that's interesting because I thought for sure it would be. I don't know which run I thought it would be, but I definitely didn't think it'd be the 1928 because obviously we look at record now and it's gone a minute down, but I guess that's how it goes, right? Because logically I look back at
Hmm.
it and I always say that my 751 was my best run ever, which is interesting because like 3 months later, obviously we found Clank Proxy and that shit went down to like 735, right? Like,
Yeah,
so it's true, it can go down so much, but nothing can quite compare to that grind and the payoff. Um, that sort of like leads me into my next topic and question, where you've sort of touched on it. Ratchet One is a very unique type of speed game, not just in the Ratchet series, but just in general, right? Like if we compare it to say Ratchet Two, Ratchet Three, Ratchet Two and Three, you get given your speed. And all you have to do is play at that max speed. There is a max movement speed, unless you get, say, Ghost Ratchet, which like
hmm,
doesn't really exist in Ratchet 2, right? Um, and that there is you're all of your tricks are trying to maintain that speed and minimize time not spent at that speed, right? Where Ratchet 1 doesn't really have that same thing because you have to work so hard to build up your speed in Ratchet 1. And it's
hmm,
difficult to reach the speed cap regardless. There's always a level of scalability, right? You could always get a tiny bit more out of every midair, right? And because of that,
for sure.
there
Yeah.
are strategies that only you and maybe 2 or 3 other people in the world can do. Like obviously NG Plus, New Velden 2, that's one of them, right? It's like you, username, Ricky. I know you three have done it. I don't actually know if any other person has done it, right? Has anyone else done it?
I think only Sneepy,
Sneepy as
Ricky, and
well,
I have
yeah.
done it.
Interesting. Yeah, because with a game like that where it's so infinitely scalable, on one hand, it feels like no matter what you could keep improving, but I imagine that for you at some point it started feeling pretty impossible.
I mean, for sure. Like, I think in every skill, in everything, there's a limit to how much you can improve, and after a certain point, it just you know, diminishes. Isn't there
Yeah.
like a law of diminishing returns? Yeah, exactly. I think that's the case for Rack 1 as well, especially in the movement, because as you've said, like there you can get good meters, but after a certain point you can get even better meters because there's still a frame data that says okay, that's the best meter you can get. And if you
Yeah.
can get like 1 or 2 frames off of the perfect meter, then you're fine. You can't obviously you will never get perfect frame perfect
Mm.
meters every time.
I mean, because you're not a Taz,
So
right? It's that simple.
exactly. So Rakwan at the end is has this peculiar skill, I would say, that is improvisation, which isn't quite as common as in the other Ratchet games. And because as you've said, like with Rec 2 and Rec 3, you have certain speeds, you have every charge has the same length, while in Rec 1, every meter has a different angle, different speed. Every neutral cancel lands in a different position, so you gotta learn how to deal with what you've dealt,
Mm.
by the
Because you
game.
can be landing in such a. It can feel very similar, but you could be, half a meter across with a slightly different angle, right? Every single time.
Exactly.
Like if you're doing a direction change, for example, battalion chain, for example, in both directions, right? That, to me, as a non Ratchet 1 player, is the most impressive split because it just looks so counter Rack 2 in that every single time I see you do it, or every high level Rack 1 player, it looks obviously rehearsed in the sense that you're doing essentially the same thing every time, but it still manages to look like a different chain every time, which is so foreign to me as a Ratchet 2 runner because I'm rehearsed down to the point where, I'm doing the exact same inputs at the exact same time every single time, and the angle and the positioning is pretty much identical because that's what the charge boots
Hmm.
give you. Like, that is what consistency and skill means in Rack 2. Whereas in Ratchet 1, you'd actually be considered a cheater if you were doing that. Like, it would be suspicious if it was that consistent, which is just
Yeah, absolutely.
strange.
Yeah, because sometimes maybe you'll just get more speed than you want, so you'll have to reduce that to make the spacing right. Maybe you wanna get a bad meter instead of a good one because
Yeah.
otherwise you bonk on the wall in front of you.
And you have to
Or
make
maybe
that decision
just get
so
a whole.
quickly.
Exactly. That's why I say that improvisation in rock band is a fundamental skill.
Yeah.
It's not
You,
only about getting the perfect meters or learning the movement. You also gotta learn the spacing and learn what to do in every position.
yeah, because you can practice the chain as many times as you want, but doesn't account for that random spot where you touch the lip in like a run, right? And then what do you do?
Yeah,
How do
exactly.
you fix it? Sort of thing. You can have your backups, but there's always new things that go wrong, right? And I mean, when it comes
Yeah,
down to
exactly.
it, we were talking about that obligation because you're one of the few people who has achieved this near, you know, pretty much as close to Taz level as humans can get, right? In terms of execution. For years we didn't have that, right? Even you look back at even 2017, 2018, which the game was starting to get considered pretty optimized, and it was, to be fair, for the time, right? But even then, you look back at them and the skill, like the actual mid-airs and whatever from that time were just noticeably worse than they are now at the highest level. So now that we're at this point where you're getting towards the actual limit, is that another thing which gives you some of that obligation to improve the time? Because you feel that you're one of
Um,
the only people who can.
I would say so. Yeah, because there's still much room for improvement in every category in Rack 1, especially in G Plus, which has the new strats.
Yeah.
But the movement the movement in the past couple of years hasn't improved that much. Again, yeah, you can notice a huge improvement from 2017, 2016 to maybe 2018 movement, but from 2018 to 2023, it's changed slightly, I'd say.
Yeah. Like we've got what one new piece of tech which is barely used. It's like PDA turns, and
Oh
that's
yeah,
like it.
yeah. PA turns which are just preference because they're not inherently faster in any point.
Yeah, which is interesting, right? Because that's the level of gameplay we're getting to, where you can, as you say, it's a very um improvisational game in that you can do the same chain in two different ways. You can literally do the same point with different tech depending on what suits you as a player, which is again not a
Hmm.
thing you see in so many speed games. Like in Ratchet 2, there is an optimal way to do everything. You can't just do it with, a decoy versus a turret clip. There is a correct way to do it. Whereas in Ratchet 1, it's like, oh yeah, you can do a PDA turn here or whatever you want really. Like that's weird. That is something that I just cannot wrap my head around as a player. It's so foreign to me.
Exactly, and that's something interesting about Rack One is that you can maybe look at 5 runs in the top 5, and everybody will be doing different movements, different chains,
Mm,
different strats. which aren't faster than the other maybe, but they're just different because everybody does what they they, they like to do better and works
Yeah, I mean the
better
amount
for
of
them.
times you see like the uh posts in like the Ratchet 1 channel where it's just people posting comparisons of chains that look completely different and then they're like within point 0.2 of each other, right? Because they're inherently
Yeah,
doing the same thing, just looking a bit different doing it. I think that's probably one of the reasons that I mean we look at a category as optimized as NG plus. We look at Rack 2, the NG plus com golds, you know, they have 2 players and it's mostly 1 player, right? We look at Ouya and let's see. There is technically three
sneakies and
players if you
ritual
include
stuff.
mission 4, right? But it's essentially 2 players, um, with a majority being 2 of them, right? And you look at all the games and you get this trend where it's majority 1 player, not really many players. You look at Rack 1, and there is a spread between you, user, Snee, Calcep's in there, right? And I've seen Tab was in there for a while. Like then you look at any percent and you got like Jish in there and Ricky's still in there, right? And it's just this huge
Yeah,
spread because playstyle matters so much and it can suit you to a different planet, yeah?
absolutely. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and again, that's like so different to. I mean, I keep on drawing the comparison to Rack 2. Obviously, that's just what I know. But like, if you're good at, I don't know, no tack, then you're good at Aranos. You're good at Uzla, right? If you're good at one clank section, you're good at all of them. But that's just not true for Rack 1. Um, you sort of touched on this
Yeah, you mentioned
before. But
yeah,
what you were sort of saying is you were driven originally by wanting to beat the other players, and then as you went forward, you got yourself to a point where, as we said, sort of turns into an obligation, and we talked about when that was. Um, Now we look at it where you've had a break for a while. Obviously, you've been busy. I mean, that happens to all of us, right? It's like I've done any speedrunning recently myself. But in a time like this where you're having a break, what do you do? Like, are you thinking about the next grind? Are you thinking about what you want to be doing? Are you thinking like, I mean, are you done? Like, is this the great reveal? Franz is done. He doesn't want to play more. Like,
no, okay, so actually, no, but not many people know, but I've been looking to get back into Raccoon. The thing is
yeah,
that I didn't have a working controller. The problem was that my left stick was absolutely ruined. Like I
yeah,
could not, when I held forward, Ratchet would not move forward, or maybe it would move at top speed, which
yeah,
you just can't play like that.
yeah. I saw those few streams
So
where
I
you were
started.
trying to play, and it looked really rough.
It's unplayable. You can't do that.
Yeah.
So recently I've been looking to buy some new controllers off of eBay, but I've gotten absolutely uh awful luck.
Yep.
I bought 2 controllers which were just horrible. Like you could not even get parts from them.
Yeah.
It's just
Okay.
a roulette with eBay and controllers. But yeah, I do want
Yeah.
to get back in Rackman for a while, especially because I think Jura has gotten an 18, maybe. So,
I
when
can
people
fact
get
check
close
that.
to you, get if it's not an 18, it might be just like a low
But
19,
you're right.
but
There have been
you
people that
got
have been
it.
improving, right? I mean, that's what happens when the
Exactly.
top player isn't playing. Snee got
Yeah.
an 18.
And when
Chikari got a 1902. Yeah, so that's fourth place, 1902, 13 days ago, right? I mean, it's the only run in the top
okay.
7 from more recent than a year ago, right? Like, that kind of says a lot about how hard it is to break into that high level in Ratchet 1.
Yeah, and when people get close to your time, you just get that feeling of anxiousness, nervousness,
Yeah, and you
and
want
you're
to go
like,
back.
oh man, maybe I gotta go back and actually get a better time because otherwise I'll lose my spot, which
Yeah.
is the only motivation I get these days, honestly. Like,
Mm.
sure, there might be a possibility for 17, but I'm not really motivated by that, even though I would go for it if I had a working controller. But I get more motivation from people trying to beat me because I've always thought the competition about speedrunning, like that's what's
Yeah.
the most fun aspect for me.
I mean, that's brutal, right? Because it's like as you say, you do want to be playing. You are motivated to play at the moment, but sometimes there are external factors, whether it's busy or in your case, your controller is just bugged, right? I think a lot of people
Yeah,
choose to neglect the fact that at a high level, you need a controller which is consistent, right? You can't play on that janky old controller that you played with when you were 6 at your nan's place, right? Where the stick would drift all
exactly.
the way across. Like, you can't do that. At the highest level, you need to be playing on hardware that is good. I burnt through. I know when I was grinding for 22, um, obviously I went like 9 months without a PB, and for most of that time period, I was playing like 6 to 8 hours a day. I burnt through 3 DS2s in that time. Like, you just
Wow.
shred them. It's ridiculous. I learned to sort of do my own basic repairs because it was just too expensive, right? I was spending like
Yeah, same. I've opened so
150
many
bucks a
so many
year on
controllers for that.
controllers, for fuck's sake. Like, it was ridiculous. Um,
It's so difficult to get good ones as well
mm,
because even if third party controllers work fine for casual play, like you feel the difference in speedrunning. Maybe because
oh
you've
yeah.
spent so many thousands of hours on that game with that controller that you can't just switch to a not official one.
Mm.
It just doesn't work.
I mean, a lot of third-party controllers are only 8 directions. That sounds like such a, first world country complaint, like, oh, I only get 8 directions. But at the highest level, which like you're doing, as you say, in a game like Ratchet 1, where it's really adaptable, the difference between, 40 degrees to the left and 45 is huge, right? It can be the difference
Hmm.
between hitting a trick and not. So you can't afford to have a third-party controller or a controller which might drop an input randomly at the end of a chain. Like, you cannot miss an input, right? Obviously, if you do, that's your
Absolutely.
fault. But if it's the controller's fault, not only does that make the run just RNG when it doesn't need to be, it's hard enough as it is, it also just weighs on you mentally, right? Because you know that it could fail on you at any point. And exactly what you're saying right now, it is really hard to be motivated to play when your hardware can fail. I learned that firsthand when my
For sure.
controllers were dying. Like, because you don't enjoy it because you're sitting there, even if you get like 15 minutes into a run, you haven't had an issue yet, right? You're sitting there like so anxious because you're like, oh, my controller could randomly just die at any moment, right? Could kill the run. Like,
Yeah,
that's not a
and
fun experience.
I've had that. Like I think there was a time where I was on pace for AGB world record back when Janky had it, and
Mm.
I was having issues with my controllers where it was just pressing random inputs. I don't know if you've seen that kind of problem,
Yeah, it's a weird
and
one.
I just went crazy. I just
Mm.
lost like 2 minutes because it was opening the PDA, closing it, buying ammo, and all of that,
Yeah.
and I could not go on. There's this famous clip about me losing that run, which has a
Yeah.
couple of thousand views.
Everyone in the Ratchet community and their nans have seen it. It's a classic clip.
Yeah, it's
We laugh at it now, but it was
heartbreaking.
painful.
I was heartbroken after that.
Yeah, I mean, because it is, it's not even RNG, right? Like, people often make the case like you choose to play a game with RNG, which I guess is fair enough. Like, if you play Minecraft and you lose a run to a bad seed, you sort of did that to yourself.
You're not
But
gonna
if you play a game without
exactly.
any RNG deliberately, like for example, when I choose Rag 2, I fucking hate RNG in speedruns, hence why I don't play stuff like Minecraft. So when I'm playing Rag 2 and I lose the run to a factor outside of my control, like a technical failure or a controller failure. I'm failing to speak right now. It is so infuriating because it just isn't your fault. It sounds so cliche, but it just
Yeah,
isn't your
it's
fault.
so tilting.
Hmm. All right, so I want to lead into the next question. I feel like we've tilted it. I'm just gonna get even more angry if we keep talking about controllers. Um, but basically, what I want to talk about next is we've discussed this in the past. I don't know if we discussed it publicly or privately. I don't remember, but I'm gonna bring it up anyway. Because I remember at one point I told you that I viewed you as the player in the Ratchet community who was the best at their given gaming category. Like, I think you are better at Ratchet 1 than anybody else is at their respective games. And I remember you saying
Oh my
when I
god,
said
thank
that to you, you were like, "But you're better at Rack 2 than I am at Rack 1." And I was like, "What?" And I remember being so confused by
you.
that. And I think it's this interesting case of just almost imposter syndrome where obviously it's hard to believe that you're actually good at something, right? And I guess what I'm asking is like, do you really feel that you are that good at Ratchet 1, or do you sort of get these feelings where you're like, I'm pretty bad at Ratchet 1, like I can improve here, I can improve there. Like how do you feel about your skill level?
All right, I'll give myself some credit. I'm gonna act a bit cocky here, but I do feel really good about my playing. Like when I watch back my clips or me maybe hitting a really good chain or some crazy movement, I feel like, oh my god, I'm so good, man. I'm
Mm.
actually crazy at this game. I'm cracked. But objectively, I think you are a better speedrunner than me because you know, like you grind so much and look for strats. Like you always look for even small time saves and you go for crazy double, triple charges, which I've never done. I'm not talking about double charges in particular, but I've never looked into small time saves or or like stuff like that. I've always been like the runner that uses struts that other people have found and just implement it in my playing. I've never wanted to look into harder struts to save a second or two because I just never cared enough. So that's why I always say that you're a better runner than me because every time I'm in your stream and you're playing right, you're just saying, oh, maybe I can do like this angle, and then you spend half an hour timing it just to find out it's half a second faster, and you just go for it and it runs, which is crazy to me because I'd never do that,
See,
you
you
know?
say objectively though, right? But I look at that and I'm like, okay, if we're looking objectively, we can look at the times you come back. You've barely fucking played the game and however long it is. You come back and you shit out record in 2 days. To me, that is objective skill. I look at me and I'm like, the quickest I've ever gotten record or my goal since coming back was 17 days. It was 12 or 17 days, I forget. And that was my sub 21. And that was because the category got much more consistent, right? I obviously got better at the game as well, but the category got more
Mhm.
consistent. And all the things you're listing to me, I look at them and I'm like, well, they're Strat Hunter things, right? It's like it's Zem always says this a lot, right? Or used to anyway. He always used to say that he didn't do strat hunting. He was perfectly happy to take the things that other people found and just be the best player at it. Which is interesting because that's the mindset I used to take before I got into strat hunting. And for example, Zem,
Mhm.
very fucking good at that, obviously. I mean, look at where he's gotten. That's not to say he's never found anything, but I don't think there is a problem. It's not really like in my head, I separate speedrunner and strat hunter. They're two different things. Um, I think
You
both
know, I
are helpful, but at the same time, like I look at it and it's like it doesn't matter if you've not done much strat hunting because I look at your gameplay and I'm just like, how can you argue with 2 days and crapping out an 1830? Like to me, that is objectively better. Like that's all there
yeah,
is
but
to it.
you you can look at it that way, like you're saying. It's very impressive that you go back to the game and just shoot out a record in a couple of days. But you could also look at it from another perspective and say, well, maybe if you got the record that fast, it wasn't that good to begin with, you know?
See, but that's unfair because a lot of the time you often come back and you implement some big time saves that have been found, and you just raise the level to the new category. I mean, to the new strats, right? So I don't think it's fair to yourself to say that your runs haven't been good. Like, do you actually feel that every run you've done since like 1928 has just not been that good? Like, surely you don't feel that way.
Uh, no, okay, of course not. Uh, but for example, I think I got a 19 flat before actually getting sub 19, and I felt way prouder about that 19 flat than the actual sub 19, the 1855,
Was
I
there new
think it
strats?
was.
I forget. after
I
19
don't
flat?
remember. I don't recall. It's been a couple of years now. But for example, my 1830, which is the current record, I do not feel proud at all. I don't think it's a good one. I lost
Really?
8 seconds in the I lost 8 seconds in fleet, and now there's new strats. So like, I think the run can go down 20 seconds at least, if not reach 17 already. So like, I don't feel proud about that run. Why would I be? Sure, I played well, but yeah.
See, that's interesting
And
because
also,
I look at that and I see you've made a mistake on one planet, right? Like, sure, you might have some small time saves elsewhere, but you're looking at one planet with a mistake. So, to you, do you feel that you are genuinely good enough at the game that you could have a run with essentially no mistakes for the entire run?
I don't think that's ever possible for anybody because everybody seeks the god run, the perfect run, no mistakes, but that's never going to be the case because even if you get better and get better times, you'll always make at least some mistakes
Well,
that
you're
will
not a
make you
Taz
think.
again.
Exactly, yeah. But those mistakes will make you think, okay, the run is actually improvable.
Mm,
You know, I think sometimes the mindset of getting the god run is detrimental because
mm,
after you maybe there, sometimes you get really lucky and you do get a run without mistakes, and then you're like, okay, so I can't play anymore because the run is perfect,
mm,
which isn't right because you do need to make mistakes in run to actually feel like you can improve it.
mm.
I don't know if that's ever been the case for
You know,
you.
you're exactly right because I've had runs which, because they've been such a consistent level the whole way through, they feel unbreakable. It's a lot easier to have a run with like a massive time save in one spot because you can look at it and you can say, I have this much time save here, right? I don't remember
Hmm.
exactly which NG Plus run it was. It might have been I think it was my 17, like 28 or something. Sorry, 728 in NG Plus. And there wasn't any major mistakes. It's a short category, so you almost can play perfectly. That's like a different ball game. But it was like every single split was 2 seconds off of comp gold, so it doesn't feel like there's a mistake anywhere, and it was really intimidating to look at. And then
Hmm.
so because of that, I got it, and I was like, "Fuck, man, I'm not beating this," and I just didn't try for ages. I was like, "No way." And then I remember at one point I just
Exactly.
really
That's what I
felt
mean.
like playing NG Plus, and so I just did, and I shocked myself because I just started getting ahead, and I'm like, I guess if you think about it, the other way you can look at it is like what, 7 splits with 2 seconds a split is 14 seconds. It's like 2 seconds a minute, right? So it
Hmm.
depends how you look at it, but you're right. One split, in your case, say fleet, with 8 seconds is really easy to pinpoint and say, I can get better at that. But it's almost a trap, as you were saying, because, well, it's impossible to get the God run, and sure, you might save 7 of those seconds, but maybe you made 6 seconds of mistakes on Orcs on one, so you've only improved it by a second, right? Like,
Yeah, but again, for the next round, you'll see the 6 seconds in Orkson, and you'll say, well, I can get those 6 seconds, and then
yeah,
continue improving
exactly.
overall. Well, maybe not getting
Yeah.
all of the 6 seconds, but you've improved generally.
Yeah, I mean, you get faster,
And
obviously.
exactly, but not if you don't play the game.
Mm. And that's,
And
in that
also,
extent, I completely agree. It's detrimental.
now another thing I wanted to discuss was you said that you separate the being a speedrunner and being a strat hunter, which I don't necessarily agree with because I think some strats are only, uh, are only you can only find them if you are a top runner. You can
Mm.
only figure them out if you're a top runner, which not many people can do. Like, so you also have like, some sort of obligation to strat hunt if you're a top runner,
Mm.
which is something I've never done. Because I remember one time a couple of years ago when Ricky was still the best one at Rack 1, where some people were theorizing strats in the Discord channel, but obviously they weren't good enough to actually test them and figure out if they were doable and actually faster. So they had to ask Ricky to test them,
Mm.
which is not. great for strat hunters, because maybe you can't envision the strat, you can't transmit what you're idealizing to someone else. So
Mm.
being the runner who's capable of finding those is probably better,
Well,
definitely
you're right,
better.
because it's really hard sometimes to express exactly what you're thinking. I mean, I talked about this a lot with Mobius actually, because when I say that I separate speedrunning skill and just speedrunners in general to strat hunters, it's contextual, right? Because obviously there's hand in hand, and I think there are obligations sort of both ways in a way. Um,
Hmm.
and basically the conclusion me and Mobius sort of agreed on was that the best speedrunners are generally also strat hunters because of the knowledge and understanding that you gain, and conversely, the best strat hunters are the best speedrunners because sometimes you need that raw executional skill, right? Like you couldn't have taken the average run of the mill strat hunter and had them found Veld 2 chain because they just aren't good enough at the tech. They just can't do it.
Hmm.
Like they won't execute it, and to that extent, you're right. But what I was saying with that is more that I mean when it comes to the actual execution of the run, I don't necessarily believe the strat hunting actually helps. That's all I really mean, right? Like my 6 hours spent doing Barlow, it might change the route that I do, but the actual run itself is not going to be impacted by that strat hunting. You know what I mean?
But think about this though. Like, what if you, let's say you find a 1 second time save, which is extremely hard to actually perform and get in a run. But since you are the one who found it, you're the one who has the most experience with it. So you'll definitely uh, benefit from having found it and having strat hunted because you're objectively the better person
Because
at
you
the
spent the
trick
most time
that you
with it.
found. That I think that's the case with most tricks that are found by top runners.
You know what? I think you've actually swayed me a bit here because I was pretty sold on my opinion, but now that you've said that, I think back to clank clips, right? Um, I'm gonna take my turn to be slightly arrogant here. I am the best at clank clips in the community, and I say that very arrogantly and very confidently. Um, but the reason being, when I theorized those, right? This is that whole strat hunting, speedrunning thing. I theorized those a year before we had consistent clips, right? Because Dudek posted his little
Hmm.
thing where he managed to clip through using just the camera. We're like, what the fuck? And I spent hours trying to imitate those clips, and I just couldn't do it, right? But from the like first 10 minutes I saw that clip, I had already theorized the routes that we now used. We didn't find them for a year and a half, right, or 2 years, whatever it was. But I knew
But
them
you still
straight
had
away.
it
Yeah. Like
exactly.
I stopped and I was like, okay, if I'm gonna spend the time to look into this clip, then how would it be used? And I created the entire route. So I had it. Then the moment Emerald found them, before I even looked into them, I just said, Emerald, make this Taz, prove to me this route exists. Right? And he did it. And then from that
Hmm.
moment, I spent pretty much every waking second of my day, apart from actually finishing the segmented that I revealed them in. Um, Other than that, I spent like 5 hours a day. It was between 4 and 6 hours a day for the next week doing clank clips, right? And at first it was really brutal. You're right, because I was the one creating the setups. No one else had actually
Hmm.
done the setups. Emerald had found ones that worked for Taz once, but didn't have them consistent. So when we posted it, we're like, hey, we have these, but we don't have setups, right? So you're right, because I then spent the whole week, my week was just clank clips. That's all I was doing. And because of that, I have such extensive
Knowledge.
knowledge of clank clips that I can't even really explain. There are such minuscule things that I could see. Like people would be asking me why their clank clips weren't working, and in my head, I would have an idea, but I couldn't express it to them because I couldn't put it into words
Yeah,
because it's just
exactly.
like my thumbs understand it and my eyes understand it, but I can't. vocalize it. So to that extent, you're right? Because I don't miss a clank clip ever. It doesn't happen. It's not a time loss that I get. That's like my most pissed off mistake. If I miss a clank clip, I am furious because to me they are just not issues, right? Whereas so many people, I don't feel like outing him like this. This feels really rude. I don't mean any, shade or harm by this, but I know I felt so bad because I could not help Manto. He was trying to learn the clank clips for ages, and now he's great at them, obviously. He's doing them all the time. He's found setups that work for him, which is fantastic. But for the first, month, I couldn't help him because I could sort of understand why his clips were not working, but I couldn't really express it. I couldn't explain why. So I just had this unfair advantage where, like, that first time I played APB, right? There were times where I had runs where I was like, I am like 2 minutes behind record. Because this is the time when record was like high 108 and there was minutes of time save. And I was just like, but because I'm good at clank clips and Manto isn't doing them, I could theoretically level with record. Which is weird because I'm
Uh-huh.
awful at APB, and that's not possible anymore because now he's doing the clank clips and he's good at them. But that was like an example of that because I'd spent the time strat hunting. I had the knowledge to be able to implement it into every category, and I just had this advantage over everyone. I had this minute and a half advantage over every other player who wasn't doing them. Right. Same with
Exactly.
poking, actually, I
Because
might say. Now that I think about it.
yeah, because those are tricks that thrive upon general knowledge that you gain by doing it hours upon hours upon
Mm,
hours of practicing and trying to figure out the best way to do it and the
mm,
consistent way to do it. And even after you figure it out and maybe make a setup for other people, they can try to mechanically copy it and replicate it, but you will always be better at them than
mm,
them because you've spent so many hours and gained knowledge on several setups that don't work, so you know what doesn't work because
mm,
you've done it before. Well, maybe they won't understand it because they're just trying to replicate what you found to be consistent,
mm.
not knowing the rest.
I often feel like knowing what doesn't work is more useful than knowing what does work because you can just avoid things that don't work
Absolutely.
and all that's left is, well, a setup that works, right? It sounds obvious, but a lot of people approach it from the other direction. They try and copy the setup, and as you say, they're doing my camera lineups for the most part. They're doing my clank positioning, but let's say that they hold their thumb in a different way on the analog stick, right? One of those really weird things that I struggle to explain. It's only recently I've been able to sort of explain what I mean with words. Um, as you do the clank clip punches, you can sort of roll your analog, and if you time that roll correctly, your angle can be off, but because you're rolling it, it's like you're doing a range instead of one angle, and as long as one of those
Mm.
angles in the range is correct, you'll clip through anyway. So you can make it much more lenient on yourself, and that's a really hard thing to get right, but people are trying to imitate my exact angle holding it straight, right? And that's not how
Mhm.
I do it. I've never punched straight. Like you look back to my original clips and I flick it and then there's a little bit of twirling, just a tiny little bit. And that's just a thing which for me happens naturally. I had never even thought about it. It was a mistake initially. One of the reasons I got worse at them when I was originally learning them in the first week was because I was trying to eliminate that until I realized that it actually helped. And that's one of those things that I tried to explain to people, but it didn't make sense. Some of that's probably because I didn't know how to explain it properly, and that's on me. But like
Yeah, I get
again,
the.
because I did the strat hunting, I understood it. Which I guess I should ask: is there any like ideas that you have? Like, are you actively avoiding strat hunting, or is it just like you feel that you don't have the ideas?
Oh, it's definitely the latter because I feel like I'm not creative at all, so I never come up with crazy strats or ideas out of the ordinary because at this point, after the game reaches a certain age, you don't stumble upon stuff. You actually gotta theorize
Mm,
and get those ideas that should maybe work theoretically, but I just don't get them. I'm not avoiding strat hunting, but yeah, I'm just not getting any ideas when I play. I just go through the motions of
Hmm.
the speed run.
Do
The
you do
only
much
strat
analysis these
that I've
days?
ever found analysis of previous runs.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I've ever done that. The only time I've done it was I think when I had a 22, and because oh, I remember this clearly. Yeah, I had just gotten a sub 23, so a high 22, and the next person in on the leaderboard was Sneaky with a really low 22, and I was like, I will never be able to reach him. So I
Right.
started analyzing the com goals, I think, and saying, oh, okay, I lose 5 seconds here, 2 seconds here for some reason. No, that was the only time I analyzed my run, but I never done it after because I just kept playing the game and got better.
Hmm.
I never felt the need to go back and say, yeah, I should be doing this better. Not because I don't feel like I should be doing that better, but because I instinctively knew already after, messing it up and
Yeah,
running
you
the
were
whole
there.
route.
You did the run.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, what was that strat you said you found? I'm curious now.
Oh, the only relevant strat that I found correct one was the long jump size at the beginning of building 2 that we do now still.
Do you
And that's it.
was
That's
that
the
like
only
a
strat.
thing you theorized, or how did that come about?
No, at the time there was some theorizing about fleet and building 2, and they found I don't know if you know about the long jump that we do still in AGB to get the first cobalt on building 2.
I
So there
think I
was
know
this
it.
route where you do there was this route that they were theorizing that was faster than that what we used to do before. We did the long jump SI to the goalboat room and then ILJ to the drag platform. And I said, well, the drag platform is over there, so maybe we can long jump SI on these mountains and get over there faster. And you actually could do that, so I did it and found the strat.
Yeah. So you would say that was an idea which
And I
just sort of
never
came
found
to you.
anything. Yeah, just instinct because I saw the long jump sides were just being found, like they were new. I was like, oh man, maybe we can do them here. It was just completely random that we actually could because many surfaces are not actually SIable, and I never found anything afterwards not relevant.
See, I look at that. You say that you don't have a creative mind, but I look at that, and that's exactly how, like, I think everything I ever found pretty much came to be. Right? Like the reason I asked you if you do analysis is because when I do analysis these days, it's not for actually looking at how the run could be done better. As you say, you just instinctively know, as I said, you did the run, you were
Hmm.
there, you know what happened. In worst case, you look at your splits and you can theorize what happened and just save the time. You know how to do the splits, right? You're the best Ratchet 1 player in the world. You know how to do the splits. That's not the thing with analysis, right? So when I do analysis these days, I'm basically trying to force my brain to disengage from the muscle memory and like the I know what I'm doing here and actually think about what's happening, right? Like the way I always talk about speedrunning theory. I think I talked about this with Mobius a bit. The purest form of speedrunning theory is how can I make this a straight line as much as possible? Especially in like Ratchet 2, where you've just got like midair charging now. Like that's all my Tabora idea was. I had the theory. I was trying to create straight lines, and I realized that sort of Tabora caves were like a loop, and I realized that you could theoretically charge in that direction. And then I remembered this Taz that I'd seen years ago. So then I look back and I'm like, okay, this has already been done, right? That already obviously makes it a lot easier. And I just go, how do I adapt this? So, like, one thing I started doing recently, or I say recently, like, at this point, it's like 3 years ago. I started looking at the Tazes because a lot of the Ratchet Tazes, at least for Ratchet 2, were done years ago when the standards were very different, right? And
Hmm.
so Sometimes they are actually Taz level because they're like, infinite climbs or
Impossible.
7 mid-airs, right? Like, they're ridiculous, but granted, I'd do 7 mid-airs if it saved enough time. But no, I'd look at it and I'd say, how could I make this RTA viable? And so for me, like with Tabora, for example, I just threw myself at it until something random happened, right? I went too far and I realized that there was a wall there that spawns in, and I just went, oh, rather than infinite climbing early, just do one mid-air charge and like wall climb it, right? So I was just taking a
Hmm.
Taz route, a route that somebody else had already done. They'd done the hard work for me. They'd created the route, and I was just saying, how can I adapt this to be RTA viable? How can I remove the aspects that are actually Taz only and make this a realistic thing? Now, with Ratchet 1, that's obviously quite difficult because it's just, I did GILJs along this whole ground, right?
Exactly.
But,
that
like, that's sort of the theory I
was
took.
that
Like,
was
I look at it that way.
yeah. When you were saying about looking at test threats, I was thinking about any rank one tests that we have. And as soon as you start thinking about them, you just realize that it's just ground
It's just
LJs from the start to the
GILJs.
end.
uh,
Which, I mean, you can kind of implement what you were saying, going from A to B in a straight line as fast as possible, which you can maybe do by looking at passes since they can build insane amounts of speed.
mm,
But most of the time, it's not really doable
yeah.
unless, the only time we were actually able to do it was developing the new building 2 strat because
Mm.
initially it was a task, and we were
But
like, maybe we can actually do it,
that one's unique because you have
and
so
we
much
were able
space to
to.
actually chain with. Like, the Taz strat just does it quicker. Like, that's just the bit of truth to it.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly, because the task just gets on the platform, ground little J's, and goes to
just
the
long
end.
jumps.
So we
Yeah.
had
Like,
to get creative and find space to actually build up speed,
which luckily you
and
have because
then we
it's
were able
Velden
to.
too. So,
Yeah, fortunately or unfortunately, if you don't want to do the strat,
mm.
you know, because it's so hard that maybe it was better if it wasn't fun. Obviously, I don't care
I think it's
either
swag. I
way.
mean, I don't
I'm
have to
happy.
do arguably the hardest strat in the series at the end of a world record pace run, so I'm cheering about it. But yeah, no, it's pretty brutal. I don't envy you going for that. I know from experience how hard it is to implement like fucking mid-air charge, and that's just one input at the end of a run. I can't imagine not being allowed to drop a single input for like fucking a 30-second chain. Like, screw that. You're nuts.
Yeah, honestly, it does feel like the ultimate rank one trick because you have to combine so many different skill set all in one.
Mm,
Being able to get good meters, build up good speed, but also you need perfect spacing,
It's
meter
everything at the
turns,
same time.
ghost rate, yeah, and also there's plenty of invisible walls at the end that you have to know where they are. So you also gotta figure that out.
And that's
It's
just
a
knowledge,
bunch
so
of
even
stuff
more.
all together. Yeah, exactly.
To me that is exciting routing. Like, obviously one of the things I've been doing in recent years is I've been trying to just take these strats that are just funny. Like, I posted them like 4 years ago, like, guys, what if we quad charged on Siberius, right? And then I just went, now these days I've already got like the last minute barrier that PS2 might ever see. Like, I genuinely believe 20 might be the last one PS2 ever sees, right? And so at this point I'm just like, well, wouldn't it be funny if I just did everything because it's fun? Like, I want an excuse to keep playing the game, and so I'm just sort of doing that. So to me, the idea of just doing this ridiculous stuff, like, I know it's gonna be hard, and I know it's gonna fail so many runs, and it's gonna be infuriating, it's gonna piss me off. But,
But you're just
like,
excited to go for it.
exactly. Like, I was never scared of doing the late. Like, scared is the wrong word. A lot of people talk about implementing new strats, like in the late game, these really hard strats, and from the get go, they're like, "Oh, I'm just scared I'm gonna lose runs," and I'm like, "You're already looking at it in the wrong way, right?" Like, when I looked at that, when
Yeah, sure.
I remember how it came to be. I was thinking about doing the mid air charges in no IMG. I was just like fucking around with Mobius in a call. And I just sort of jokingly, he just throws out there, like, what if you just did the NG Plus route in no IMG? And it was weird because he was joking, but then I thought about it and I'm just like, nah, but you're right though, because there's not
Maybe.
a really good reason that you can't. And that sort of blew my mind away because I was like, so much of what we call the limits of speedrunning are just mentally imposed. And you let yourself be so intimidated by it. Like, you think about it, it's like, everyone said before I did Yeetle mid-air charge in no IMG, right? They were like, there's no way you're hitting under pressure a mid-air charge in the last, you know, 15 seconds of that run. And then I just said, but
Hmm.
what if I do it though, right? And it was really exciting. Like, sure, nerves were bloody making me nervous, like, making me shake and numb through the entire split, but it was so exciting to me. And like, do you get what I mean? Like, that to me, I look at a strategy like Velden 2 Chain, and I just think, if I was good at Ratchet 1, that is the kind of strat that I would just love. I would eat it up because I love a
Oh,
hype ending and it's just
absolutely.
exciting, right? Like, do you want to just do it?
I mean, it's honestly one of the most fun strats to practice because it's so
Exactly.
satisfying to actually get it.
Yeah.
Uh, but like what you're saying is what makes you honestly one of the greatest speedrunners I know because you're so eager to implement all of those strats and all of those reroutes because most runners are not afraid but they don't want to change up things. They don't
They
want
want to
to
lose
change the
runs.
route. They don't want to implement new strats. Yeah, they just want to do runs with what they're comfortable with, which is
Mm.
not what you do because as soon as the possibility comes up for a new route or something even slightly faster, you're just like, oh hell yeah, I gotta do it. Like
Mm.
what left me speechless was the swing shot the storage route that you do in I think you still do it in NG Plus. I'm not sure,
I've been messing with it.
but
I intend to do it, but yeah.
it's crazy to me how like you have to do all that menuing because not only that you change some strats, you also gotta think about all the new quick select shenanigans, the menu, the triangle inputs, the lag. You gotta change so many things, which is crazy. Like no one wants to do that because nobody wants to change the run that they're comfortable with, you know?
Mm. See, to me, like, you're right, nobody does want to, including me initially. I tried it for a while and then dropped it because I hated it. And then recently I wanted to redo it and do it again because I just realized it's just like everything else. It's just a problem to solve. Like, that's really the
Hmm.
way I look at it. There is a fastest way to play Ratchet 2. I am just trying to get as close to my segmented route as possible, right? As humanly possible. That's realistically, if I had to summarize my goal in like a sentence, get the record as close to a segmented route as possible. That really is the purest form of speedrunning. And I look at something like
Hmm.
swing shot storage and I just say, yeah, it makes the whole thing different. It makes it harder. It ruins all of my muscle memory. But
But it's
is that
faster.
well, not even that. Like, it's faster, but recently it's different. Like, I've been doing the same things, right? Aranos 1, nobody, for example, when the elevator proxies came out, nobody else implemented them for like half a year because, oh, intimidating. For the record, they're not
Uh-huh.
fucking hard. It's just that, as you
It
say,
only takes one
nobody wanted
person.
to change things, right? Everybody wanted to keep their first split, which is notoriously difficult, the same. Whereas I was the exact opposite. I was like, dude, this split has been the same for 2 years. Hell yes. Give me something unique. Give me something different, right? I was jumping
For
at the
sure, yeah.
opportunity to change it. And that's the same with swing shot storage. Like, I'm like, this is the only thing that I can do that changes the route and keeps it fresh. I have done 20,000 attempts, just like you've done of NG Plus, right? The splits that were
Yeah.
the same, if I just kept doing them, that is the only splits which get boring to me ever in Ratchet. It's the splits which are the same. The only split I find boring in NG Plus at the moment, and I don't even find it that boring, but I find Gorn the most boring, not because it's a ship level, but because it hasn't changed, right? All we've added is a
Uh,
little warp by just holding two triggers. But other than that, it hasn't changed in the entire time I've been playing the game. And that to me is boring. because it hasn't evolved. It's stayed. It feels stagnant. It feels like 2016, right? I want my route to entirely
Yeah,
feel
for
new
sure.
and unique, right? Like, do you get that sort of feeling? I guess you sort of said you don't, but you get where I'm coming from?
Uh, no, I definitely understand what you're saying. That unfortunately, Rock One, that's even rarer because we got so many levels that like
Mm,
you can't get faster than that. Like for
mm,
example, Eudora, that there's a cliff there, and you can't go through that wall any faster. Even
yeah.
Real Girl, where you gotta do the snap flips at the start. Okay, you do the snap flips and then you come back, and that's it. Umbriss, you go to the boss and come back, and that's it. Like
Mm,
unfortunately, you reach a point where you can't evolve any further, which
mm,
I guess we reached in many places in Rec 1.
mm.
But
Without
yeah, I
finding
understand what you're
something
saying. Like
huge
I
and
would like
unique.
I would I would love to find like something new on Eudora or something new on Umbris that makes us even faster. Even something
Mm.
harder, but like there isn't.
I guess to sort of tie it back to like what you were asking me, like the comment about speedrunning versus strat hunting. That to me, keeping it that way, keeping the run itself exciting is the reason that I got into strat hunting. Like in a sense, that I obviously wanted to find time saves, right? It was a lot easier back in the day when I first got into it. Obviously, it was a lot less developed. Like I first got into it by finding like no tack, return movement, stuff like that. And at the time, it was sort of just find time save. But now it's like I look at the run because I want any excuse to change something because then it feels fresh. It might be only a 0.5 second change, but that is a big
It's
deal.
something new.
Yeah, it's new. It can change it, right? I'm only saving what is it, 2.5 seconds for doing YOLO Siberius entry and quad charge. But it's something new, right? I've been doing the same, well, slight variations, but essentially the same thing for so long. And don't get me wrong, it's a fun split, but you know what's more fun? Quad charging, Like it's exciting, and that really is why I strat hunt these days because I just want to keep the game fresh, which is also why I don't strat hunt much in games that I don't run. That's a question I've been thrown before. Like, people ask me, oh, why don't you strat hunt when you play Ouya, for example? And I'm like, well, just playing that game, whenever I sit down and just practice Ouya for fun, it still feels fresh because I don't have the experience with it. Like,
Exactly, and I feel it's also like a question of knowledge. Like
mm,
if you pick up a new game, you don't have that knowledge to strat hunt and find a new strat. Like that's also
exactly.
something to consider.
It takes time to learn that
Like
stuff.
even absolutely, like even if I have a 29 in Ouya, I don't feel like I'm at the level to start finding new stuff because I don't have the skill and I don't have the knowledge about game tech and all of that. Like you gotta be experienced to be a strat hunter as well.
I think it's interesting in games like Ouya, like, as much as I love these games, and I think there are definitely strats you've got to just be good at to find. Like, as much as I simplified and dumbed down my thought process for finding to borrow double charge, right? You've still got to have the game knowledge of why wall climbs can get dropped. You've got to be able to do mid-air charges and be pretty good at turret clipping in third person, which a lot of people are not good at. Like,
Hmm.
there's a lot of really niche things that go into finding a strat like that, and I recognize that. Like, these days, I use third person turret clipping as just like second nature, but I thought about it the other day. I'm like, I forget that that's not a beginner strat. A lot of people don't learn how to third person turret clip in Rack 2. It's probably a thing that like only 5 to 10 people can do just as comfortably as I can do it. Or, well,
Wow.
not as comfortably as I can do it, but, do it all. I don't see people do it. People do decoy, they'll do first person turret, but like nobody does it. So there is that sort of nicheness to it.
Barrier.
But there are
Hmm.
also, because of the nature of what we talked about before, where the game is just keeping your speed, there is a very simplistic nature to it. Like, I always talk about no tack death abuse, right? We'd been overcomplicating the return for years, and then we got these fresh eyes. At the time, world record in no IMG was like 21, right? And this guy had like a 32, and he comes in and he's just like, guys, you can just avoid the checkpoint and kill yourself, and you save 5 seconds. And we're just like, whoa. And that's my point. Like, you just sometimes need fresh eyes, and it is that simple, right? Like, all of us,
Yeah,
every single strat hunter for years missed that, right? And that is just, that is, you don't even need to do the straight line from A to B when you can just teleport from B to A, right? So,
it was such a
yeah.
funny strat because I remember you doing like what double, triple charge back to the ship.
Yeah. Good strats, man.
God.
Good times. That, like, that's nostalgic. But that's what I mean, you know, like, it is inherently easier to strat hunt in some games than others. Like, Ratchet 1, because we have, like, I think it was the first game with Replanetizer, so we had those practice tools, and there's less of those sort of just teleport back sort of things, and a lot of those basic
Hmm.
stuff realistically have been found now. But because Ratchet 1 is so scalable, which is what we've talked about a lot, that does make the strat hunting barrier for entry very high for a game like Ratchet 1.
For
Which is
sure.
why I get what you mean when you're saying, like, you feel obligated to strat hunt, and would I be correct in saying you sort of feel bad that you don't?
Yeah, exactly. Like under that point of view, you just I just should do it, but I never found the will to.
Mm. Yeah,
But
see, it's
you
strange
know,
because it's such a, you're right, it's such a obligatory thing, in that, at least that it feels that way. Not saying that you're like, oh my god, you should be guilty, but it feels that way. It's hard to shake that obligational feeling to the game.
exactly. And even when new strats are found, you are the one who has to implement them because if you
Mm,
don't do it, nobody else will.
mm,
And it just takes one person to make a strat ordinary. So as soon as the top player implements it, then other people will follow automatically. But
mm.
that's always been the case for everything. And if you don't
Even when
do
it's not
that,
a hard
nobody
strat.
will. So exactly, like you also feel that sense of obligation under that
Mm.
aspect.
Like, even though you obviously have a dead controller at the moment, I bet you're feeling antsy that you can't play.
Yeah, I was quite annoyed when the controllers from eBay arrived and they just didn't work because
Mm,
I was just not dreaming, but I was looking forward to. Oh man, I gotta go back to playing Rec One. Can't
mm.
wait to start practicing again. But then I physically can't. I don't have a working controller. Like I
Yeah.
would have to use a DS4 to play, which you can't do because again, if you have 3,000 hours in a game with a DS3 controller, you can't just pick up a new one and expect to be as good as with that one.
It's changing hardware. I always say
Like
this, it's like they can feel very similar, but even two working DS3s can be different, right? I always say this, obviously I'm a tennis player and coach. I can play with any tennis racket. There's a lot of different tennis rackets. But I cannot play at my highest level with any racket except the one that I've been training with every day for the past year, right? Like, it's the
for
same
sure.
with a controller. You get a new controller and it's just a little bit stiffer, so you undershoot some of your side flips. It can be very simple, but that makes a big difference. If you're undershooting, a long jump or two every split, that's suddenly 10 seconds over the run, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's
and
a big deal.
this hardware issue is a problem with as many skills and hobbies as I can think of because as a piano player, you're used to playing the piano at your home, but then
Mm,
as soon as you start and you start, laying your fingers on something new, you're like, what the fuck is this, man?
mm.
Those are not. I'm playing so poorly right now because you're just not used to that.
I imagine that even like the pressure it takes to press a key might be different.
It's so slightly different that it just modifies everything about you
Mm.
play.
Throw off your muscle memory.
Exactly.
Mm. And I think what it really comes down to is obviously all this obligational type stuff. We make it sound really negative, but I think people forget that it's like just because we're taking a break as like top level runners, you know, we might be really tilted. That might be the reason for our break. We might just be really busy, but people forget that the reason we run them in the first place is we love the games, right? Like, all of
Absolutely.
what speedrunning is at the highest level is essentially maximizing your enjoyment, right? Like, to me, the reason I try and practice and get better and I do all these things, I was talking about how I just enjoy doing new strats. That's the reason. It's not because like, oh, I'm going to get this crazy time. It's just I enjoy doing whatever's fastest. It feels fun, right? And
Exactly.
keeping the game fresh and exciting is the only thing you can hope to do. And obviously, you've got players that, you know, embody that aren't world record holders, but just embody that. I mean, you look at Jish, right? He did swing shot route for 80% for years because that was his route. It's what he enjoyed. It's what he did. And he was the best swing shot route. Like, he just was.
Yeah, he just
Because,
loves that route. So
yeah.
as long as you maximize your enjoyment of the game, then like, you're doing the best that you can,
Mm. But I think people
for
sometimes forget
yourself.
that just because you're trying to maximize your enjoyment, even though it's a hobby, there's still that level of work that goes into it, right? Again, I draw the analogy of tennis. I love it. It's my world. It's everything I focus on these days, right?
Hmm.
But to enjoy the match, to enjoy that tournament that you've been training for a month, you have to do the training. You're not going to have a fun tournament if you slack off, right? If I don't put the time in the gym or if I don't go to the training every day at least, right? Like that's the sort of thing where sometimes to get the most out of your hobbies takes hard work, right? And in speedrunning,
But
that
you
hard
do also
work
find
is
enjoyment.
practice.
You do find enjoyment in the training because you're looking forward to this moment
Exactly.
as well.
Got to learn to enjoy the process and like the requirements, not just the actual. Like obviously everyone enjoys the feeling when you get the record. You finally break through and you get it, but that's not all there is to speedrunning. If you're not enjoying the journey, what's the point? Like that's sort of the whole thing, right? Like if you can't learn to
But
enjoy the journey, I don't think you're going to enjoy the result. You know what I mean?
many hobbies, even if they have the practice and the training of that, don't have that event or competition that will
Mm,
make you feel good about yourself. Like that's what speedrunning is so good for. Like you practice and then you get a PB and you feel great because you actually see concrete improvement, which isn't always the case for so many other things.
mm.
Even with tennis, like you can practice maybe for 2, 3 months for a competition for a tournament, then go there and lose, and you'll feel awful, you know.
Mm.
But uh, but with
And it,
speedrunning, even if you practice for 2 months, like it's not like you're not gonna get PB. Eventually, you'll do it,
mm.
and you'll feel so great about yourself that you'll get addicted to the practice, to the hobby, and
I think
keep
the
playing.
the interesting thing as well is a lot of the time how much you're enjoying it is reflected in your results. Like I think back to, as I said, that 9 month drought where I didn't PB in no IMG, and it reached a point where I was working so hard towards it that I lost sight a little bit of the fact that it was a hobby. Right? I think a lot of speedrunners have had that time where they're working so hard towards that goal that they lose sight of the fact that it's a game that you're playing that you enjoy, and that relentless grind every day of getting tilted and not enjoying it, right? Like you hear the people that are so clearly not enjoying it and they keep with it regardless. And that's reflected in the results. Like I look back at it, the reason it took me 9 months is I spent more than half of that time going through the motions without actually enjoying what I was doing, because I wanted the result more than I wanted the journey, which is why towards the end I took a break because I realized I wasn't enjoying it. And then I came back and within like 3 weeks I got it because I was enjoying it again, right? Like, and that's what it comes
Yeah,
down
I
to.
get it.
Like, that's why I take breaks these days because it's, well, for one, I don't have time, but even if I do, it's like, it's so easy to fall into the trap of, hey, I'm in a grind. I'm playing this game 6 hours every day because if I don't, I'm not going to PB, which is not true, dude. You just got to play as much as you enjoy. Like, that's
Yeah,
really
you
all it
gotta
comes
look out
down
for
to.
your mental health,
Yeah, exactly.
and that's I feel like that's something you learn through that mistake that you were talking about, where you go through the motions without actually enjoying them because you gotta reach that goal that you fixated
Mm.
on. Like for example, I had that when I was running for world record for the first time because after a certain point I reached, I think it was second place, and I thought, or third place, and I thought, well, maybe I can actually get world record. And that was the
Mm.
moment where I lost sight of why I was playing. I was playing because I was having fun, because I was loving racing my other friends. And as
Mm.
soon as I started thinking about what record, my mentality just skydived, just
Yeah.
dropped. And I was for 3 months, no, maybe 2 months, I was just playing every day, going through attempts, and
Mm.
I was raging, I was tilting, I was smashing my keyboard when I lost runs. I was
Yeah.
really in a poor mental state, and that was because I lost sight of my initial goal, that was just enjoying the game,
Mm.
and I had to take a really long break before going back, and eventually getting world record. I think 3 months later in November for the first time, and it was just
From there, it was
the end of
enjoyment because
that.
you sort of learn your lesson.
Exactly.
Yeah,
But
I
after
think.
that, after you make that mistake, you just learn that you have to take breaks at certain points if you don't want to,
Mm.
you know, ruin yourself.
Because otherwise, without like, so many people think you could just minimize how much you play. I think people underestimate the pull that it has, right? Like, I know when I was doing that, I knew that I had to take a break because if I hit that click stream button, I wouldn't let myself stop until I saw at least the 4 or 5 hour mark get hit, right? It was like a
Hmm.
quota. I was trying to meet a quota of attempts per day, right? I was getting to a point where I was unhappy if I hadn't clocked like 150 attempts in a day, right? And that is not healthy. It just isn't. It doesn't matter how you look at it, right?
Yeah,
And I think
as soon as you,
so many people as they go for their first record, as you say, you get that switch. You realize, wait, I could actually get record here. I could be the best in the world at something. And that it's like tantalizing. You put candy in front of a baby and don't let them have it. That's the sort of thing you're doing, right? And it's so easy to get consumed by it. And I think so many people have told that story of the first time they get record, it's not just this great feeling of finally I got record, it's this relief of it's over. I mean, how many times have you heard people pop off with like it's over, right? That is a
yeah, for
double-edged
sure.
comment, right? Because on one hand, it's like I've done it, I've succeeded what I wanted to, but it's over does not have positive connotations. Like think about that, right? Like to say it's over inherently means weren't
That
necessarily
you did
enjoying
not
a lot
enjoy
of
the
it.
journey.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
exactly. I think that, I mean, I've been talking about the dark side of speedrunning with everyone because I really have been trying to, I guess, almost raise awareness that I think I want people to be careful of these things. I want people to not make the same mistakes that I made and that so many other people have made. Because speedrunning is such a positive thing, right? When done properly. There are so many things I've learned from speedrunning. I've made so many friends. It's a great thing as a whole. But at the
Hmm.
same time, it's this huge addiction and it can just consume you and it can do bad things. Just realistically, it's the same as a million other things, right? Like alcohol, for
Oh, that's
example, right?
absolutely true.
Like you can have like a couple of drinks and that's okay, but if you suddenly start having 7 drinks a day, that's a problem. And I think that's the same exact thing which happens with speedrunning, except that it's this mental torment cycle that you're just putting yourself through, and it's not healthy,
Yeah,
but
I
people do it.
I often think about how speedrunning affected my life,
Mm.
and there are so many positives. Like I don't think my English would be as good as it is today if it
Mm.
wasn't for speedrunning, because like you're forced to watch streamers and playing in English, speaking English, chatting
Mm.
with other people, discussing strats in English, and that's absolutely like a positive that speedrunning gave me, and it also helped me in life with discipline.
Mm.
I was not a good student before speedrunning in school, but after you learn how you should be practicing, you can also apply that to studying. At least that was
Yeah.
my experience. Like I became a great student. I'm top 10 in my uni class now.
Mm.
But and I don't think I would be here if it wasn't for speedrunning. But there's also so many negatives because like as you've said, it's an addiction, and you gotta feel it. Like if you wanna play to reach world record, you have to get so many hours that you have to give up something else. And like in my case, I just stopped hanging out with some friends
Mm-hmm.
at the time,
Yep.
and that impacted my life negatively.
Sure.
And now I find myself having to catch up on what I lost with speedrunning in life.
Mm.
But again, I don't regret speedrunning because it gave me so many good things, as well as so many friends that I still speak to today.
Mm.
And discipline of English and all that. I will never regret speedrunning.
I mean,
But
like,
you're
look at
also
us,
good
right?
at
Like, that's the way you can
acknowledge.
see it. Like, neither of us have speedrun our games seriously. I mean, your last record, let's look at that. All check marks 3 months
Uh,
ago. I look at mine, and when was
yeah,
my last fucking record? October 2022, right? So ages ago. And yet, months and months on, so, clearly not running, and here we are having a very heartfelt conversation, right? Like, that is something that speedrunning just gives so many people. As you say, that's a great positive. And I had the same experience with you, right? Like, where do you think I found, right? Like, or I ask people this all the time, where do you think I found the hours to stream every day? It's like, well, where
yeah,
do you have your social life? And it's like, well, in the heat of a lot of my biggest grinds, I didn't have a social life because that was the
yeah,
sacrifice. And
exactly.
that's not healthy. I don't support that. I never do that now. Right? That's why, like, the last time I grinded, I was doing 2 hours a day and I was succeeding because I was happier than ever because I was still having a life. Right? And I think that on one hand, it's like, yeah, if you play 8 hours a day, you're going to get better. Like, obviously.
But,
But
but is it worth it?
yeah, exactly. It's like you can do that in other ways. You can just do efficient practice. Like, I mean, it's the same as anything, right? Like, I just want people to understand that it is a double-edged sword. It is fantastic, as you said. There's so many benefits. I also, for the record, I don't regret speedrunning either. I think my life is so much better because of it. I have learned so much about myself because of speedrunning, right?
Hmm.
But I mean, you think about the things you sacrificed. I definitely sacrificed some academic achievement. I'm not an academic person. I don't really care. But I definitely did. I definitely sacrificed some social things. Definitely sacrificed some family time, stuff like that, right? And I regret
Hmm.
those parts of it. But those were decisions as a person, not as, you know, a speedrunner. They were impacted, same as an alcoholic would choose, alcohol over whatever, hanging out with their family or saving money, stuff like that, right? It's got real
For
deep real
sure,
quick,
yeah.
but like that's my point. It can be so good, but it can be so bad. I'm gonna teeter us away into a more positive topic, to potentially end this out on, because I was just getting bloody depressed. But um, going back to what we sort of talked about over an hour ago now, we're talking about obviously you're one of, if not, in my opinion, you are the best Ratchet runner. And I basically just want to ask, how do you feel being held in that higher regard?
Wait, do you mean the best Ratchet one runner or just in general?
Well, both, right? Like a lot of people view as the best Ratchet runner, a lot of people view as just the best Ratchet 1 runner. Like regardless, it's still high regard. Like how does it feel to be held
No,
in
yeah,
that way?
of course, of course. Like I've always loved being praised by other people. I think that's what pushed me to top times at the beginning because I don't know if you remember at the time, but when I was getting in the top 10, maybe top 5, so many people in the Rack One Discord channel were just saying, "Oh my God, France is so good. Maybe he's gonna be
Hmm.
able to beat Ricky or Scaff." And I was like, man, so many people have high regards of me. I I gotta get the record just for them. I gotta get the record so I can be praised even more,
Mm.
which might be a toxic trait. Like I was doing it for them and not for myself. I mean, actually, I was doing it for myself because I wanted the praise. Uh, so
Well, I think it's hard
now that
not
I
to,
got the
right? Because people are just naturally, like, especially the Ratchet community is very supportive. It's not that you're not necessarily doing
hmm
it for yourself, because obviously you still want that record because you want to be able to say, I have record, right? But
yeah,
it's hard to not, I get what you're saying, it's hard to avoid and not think about that part where it's like, wow, everyone else wants me to succeed as well. I want to succeed, not just for myself now, but I want to succeed so I don't let these people down.
yeah, and there was all this hype about me beating Ricky that I just went for it. But
Mm,
again, as I was saying before, maybe there was what made me switch the mentality from enjoying the game to actually going for record. So even though I was enjoying people pushing me towards towards being the top runner, I guess it also hurt me because it changed how I viewed the game.
yep. That's what caused the mentality switch, you would say.
hmm for sure.
Mm,
And well, now I just feel like a big part of the community, even though I'm not as active as other people, maybe in streams and all that. I just feel like I'm a big part because I spend so much time with Rap One that I
mm.
can be considered like one of the pillars, maybe. So I'm
Well, your
happy
opinion's
to have
always going to be
become
relevant. Like, you've
exactly.
achieved that, if
I'm
nothing else.
also yeah, it's almost like I've created a legacy for myself
Yeah.
where I can say, even if I'll never pick up a controller again or I'll never pick up Red One again, I'll be regarded as one of the top players in the game, which is enough for me. You know, like many people want to have this recognition for many years
Mm.
after after they've stopped playing, or even for other things. You know, musicians or uh, like after they've died, they want to have their music or their poetry or their
Yeah.
you know, legacy just keep going, and that's great. I think it's one of the best things that you can accomplish. You know,
Mm.
having like being spoken of years or hundreds of years after your death, or in this
Mm.
case, after you stop playing. You
Well,
know,
we'll see if the games are still running 100 years, but I get what you mean. No, it's like you described it as toxic traits. I don't even necessarily agree. I think it's just human nature, right? People want recognition for the things that they do. And I totally get what you mean with the legacy stuff as well. It's like one of the reasons for so many years I didn't want to step away from Ratchet 2 is I didn't feel like if I stepped away from it that it would keep getting looked after the way that it was, right? Because I cared so much about strat
Mhm.
hunting, I cared so much about running it. One of the reasons I'm not running right now is I don't feel like I have to force myself to make time because I feel like the young guns have taken over and are pushing it, you know, like Emerald with finding PS3 being faster and pushing it all the way to actually be there, right? And then
Yeah,
Pentali looking into it and all that sort of stuff. Like I felt like after all these years of trying to be that guy, I was able to finally just say the new guys
I've done
have it.
it.
And then as you say, it's about that legacy. Like just talking to new runners and realizing like I mean, you get talk to the social media side of it, where people say that you are the reason they started running, and that is in like that's the kind of value I didn't expect to get out of speedrunning. I expected it to be a hobby. I didn't expect to be encouraging people to play a game
Looked
because I'm
up
just
to.
doing what I love, man. Like I play the game, I enjoy it, I have a great time, and then these other people come along and they're
hmm
like, "Man, you made me want to play the game," and that is an indescribable feeling. Like it's not even necessarily so much about being remembered for my successes. Like, sure, obviously, everyone likes the ego boost. Like, we're not going to pretend we don't. I think there's a certain level of just arrogance you need to, not arrogance, but confidence and almost attention seeking you
Confidence, yes.
need to have to be a world record holder, right? But beyond that, it's also just like the want for the game itself to be remembered. I feel like I've done my
Hmm.
part in keeping my passion alive because it was such a big part of my life for 5-6 years now, right? And it helped me change as a person. And I don't care if people forget my name in 10 years, right? 15 years, whenever it may be, that people forget what everything that I've done for Ratchet 2. As long as, Ratchet 2 stays alive. And it, in some way, I know that I had a big hand on that because, as you said, we are pillars now. Like, whether we like it or not, we did the work and we created.
We moved the game forward.
Exactly right. And without us, there's no guarantee what would have happened. There would have been potentially voids in the history of the games. We happened to fill them, but
Hmm.
and people like to say that if we didn't, somebody else would have. But can you be so sure, right? I felt like I had to keep playing, so I
Yeah,
wasn't sure someone else would.
look at how many games have just world records that have still stood still for 3-4 years
Mm.
now because nobody just cared enough to go forward.
Mm. Sometimes I don't even care enough. It's just intimidation. Sometimes the only person crazy enough to try and beat a record is the person who actually said it, right?
Hmm.
And it takes
For sure.
someone equally crazy to come along and say, "Yeah, I could beat that." But that kind of person doesn't come along all that frequently. Hmm. I think that's probably. I think we've both concluded our thoughts on that. I think that's probably a great spot to end it. Now that we're Jesus
That's a
Christ,
great,
guess how
yeah,
far
that's a
through
good
we are.
spot. I don't know, like 1:30.
Yeah, 1 hour, 37 minutes. That makes this, I think, the longest episode of all three. Congratulations. You have successfully made me speak about 20 minutes longer than I planned to
Let's
again.
go.
Let's
Let's
go.
go.
But no, are there any sort of closing thoughts you want to throw on anything that we sort of talked about today? Because we talked about a lot.
Uh, First of all, I want to thank you for having me on
Oh,
here,
no worries, man.
and
Again
it was
sometime, for sure.
great speaking to you for sure. Yeah. But no, I'm not done yet with Rack One. I definitely don't feel like
Heard it here first,
I've
folks. Let's
accomplished
go.
everything. I've accomplished everything that I set out to do because there's still the famous sweep that I should get.
You saying
But
that's
yeah, maybe one day.
in very close plans? Is that what we're
Maybe
hearing?
if I can manage to get a controller because everybody's teasing me like Manto saying, "Oh, I have this perfectly working perfectly fine BS3 that I could send you." But shipping from the US to Italy is kind of
Dude, shipping
expensive and
anything
all
out
of
of the
that.
US to any other country literally costs like
It's
half your
like,
life savings. It's ridiculous.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, sure, I love Recon, but I don't love it enough to spend $90 on
Yeah.
that controller.
Bro, I
But
spent
Isaac is
more
also
on
looking to
on
buy.
shipping than my console when I had to import my PS2.
It's unreal, man. Like,
Yeah.
why?
Hmm.
But yeah, maybe soon. We'll see.
Fantastic. All right, well, thanks for coming on, man. I mean, I had a great time talking to you, and I think we
Yeah,
covered some really.
same.
I
Thank you.
learned some things about you for sure. I expected some of the answers you gave me, but I really didn't expect some of the other ones. You really threw me for a spin
Dude.
on some of those. I thoroughly enjoyed getting inside that head a little bit and understanding you a bit better.
I'm
But yeah,
glad. Because since I don't speak on stream, not many people actually get to know my personality, you know?
mm, yeah, or your voice even. I'm sure there are going to be people listening to this that didn't know you had a working voice box.
I do have workout cards.
Oh my god, yeah, that's crazy. But yeah, thanks everyone for listening. It's a great time as always. The next guest is actually confirmed. I guess I'm gonna start publicly announcing them. The
Oh
next
my
guest
god.
is Jish Kared. So if you want
Bro.
to send in some questions for him and for us to talk about, then yeah, leave them in the comments. If you don't want to do it publicly, feel free to send me a DM. Lots of people have been sending me DMs on Discord, and that is totally fine. I try to respond. And some people would have noticed I asked some of their questions today. So yeah, send them through, give me some feedback, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.